Hey there, survivor. If you can hear this, it means you're still alive. This is Jack's Nightmares, and this is your next story. I start recording this in the front seat of an unmarked van parked under the concrete overhang behind St. Alder Hospital. The engine is off. The building above me is still lit, floors glowing yellow through narrow windows, nurses moving between rooms, stretchers rolling past glass doors. None of that looks unusual. What feels wrong is how quiet the garage is. No traffic echoing in, no radios squawking from other units, just the hum of ventilation fans and the faint ticking of hot metal cooling under the hood. My phone has no signal down here. The dashboard radio is locked to our operations channel and nothing else bleeds through. That never happens in a city this size. My name is Marcus Vell. I am the team leader for Metro Special Weapons and Tactics, Charlie Team. I have been doing this job long enough to recognize when someone above me is holding back information. Tonight has that feeling from the first minute. The call-out came fast, with no build-up, no detailed pre-brief, and too many phrases that sound legal instead of practical. High priority, limited exposure, direct action only. Those words usually mean somebody wants a problem to disappear without creating a new one. We were pulled out of sleep at 02:30 hours. No time to argue. No chance to ask questions that might slow things down. The watch commander sounded drained, not urgent. He said the city was handling multiple incidents and our unit was being diverted to something contained but unstable. That wording bothered me. Contained situations do not get SWAT teams in the dark. By 04:50 hours, I had 5 operators geared up and rolling. We should have had 7. 2 were pulled off the roster and never replaced. No explanation. That alone told me this assignment was being kept narrow on purpose. Fewer people involved means fewer witnesses later. My team is solid. Evan Rusk runs point as breacher. He is quiet, steady, and careful with his hands. He treats doors like problems that can be solved instead of enemies to be punished. Noah Kim is our marksman. He sees movement early and does not rush shots. When things get strange, he talks too much, but he never loses discipline. Luis Ortega is our medic, which in reality means he can slow bleeding, keep airways open, and tell you honestly when someone is past help. Derek Shaw handles technical objectives. He came up through cybercrime and learned to move tactically later. He does not pretend to be something he is not. I am the one who keeps them moving and makes decisions when nobody wants to make them. That is the job. I do not sell it as hero work, and I do not apologize for it. But there are nights when the weight sits heavier than usual. Tonight is one of those nights. The briefing took place in a loading bay office behind the hospital. 3 people were waiting for us. A deputy chief I had never worked with before. A fire department hazmat captain who looked like he had not slept in days. And a woman in plain clothes who did not give her name or title. The deputy chief did most of the talking, but the woman watched our faces closely, especially mine. The directive was a single page: location, access point, objective. One line near the bottom stood out more than the rest. No detainees, no survivors, no explanation, no conditions. That is not normal language for law enforcement. That is cleanup language. I asked whether we were dealing with terrorists or a containment breach. The deputy chief told me to treat all occupants as hostile. When I pressed him on who exactly counted as an occupant, he said anyone inside the wing. That answer did not sit right. Hospitals are full of people who never agreed to be in the middle of something like this. Shaw asked about the technical objective and was handed a printed label with a room number and rack position. That kind of specificity told me this was planned well in advance. The woman added that the drive was not to be accessed or copied, only delivered directly to her. She said it without raising her voice, like she was ordering coffee. I asked for a threat description, what we were walking into, weapons, numbers, behavior. The deputy chief gave me nothing useful. He said there had been an incident, staff stopped responding, and security failed to make contact. That is not a threat assessment. That is an excuse. The hazmat captain finally spoke. He explained the wing was on independent air handling with negative pressure, doors interlocked. If we breached incorrectly, we risked contaminating the rest of the hospital. He admitted they did not know what was inside anymore. That admission made the kill order make more sense, even if I hated it. We geared up heavier than usual. Sealed gloves, taped cuffs, tight respirators. Not full hazmat suits, but enough to make movement harder and breathing louder. Luis checked every seal twice. Evan made a half joke about the smell building up inside the masks. Nobody laughed. I told the team exactly what I had been told. Lethal force only, no extractions. Retrieve the data and seal the wing. Noah asked if the order was legal. I told him the truth. I did not know. I only knew it came from high enough that refusing it would not stop it. Someone else would go in instead. We entered through a service corridor behind the hospital. A security guard opened the door for us with shaking hands. He said he was not going down there. I did not argue. I told him to open the door and step away. He entered the code wrong twice before the lock finally disengaged. Cold air spilled out from inside, filtered and dry. The corridor was narrow. White walls, grey floor, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. A security camera above the door had a cracked lens. That detail stuck with me. Cameras do not break themselves. We moved in tight formation, boots loud on concrete, respirators amplifying every breath. The first checkpoint door was locked with a badge reader. The override key was missing. Evan checked the construction and set a small charge. The blast was controlled and quick. The door jumped and hung crooked. No alarm followed. Beyond it was an antechamber with disposable gowns scattered across the floor and a cart tipped on its side. Long scrape marks cut through the paint on one wall. Somebody had been dragged or had clawed their way along it. Shaw noticed it immediately. Nobody said anything. The next door was an airlock. The screen demanded a decontamination cycle. The emergency override lever was bent from rough handling. When Evan pulled it, the system chirped once and died. The inner door stuck before he forced it open. That told me the systems here were failing, not shut down cleanly. The quarantine wing itself was larger and quieter than I expected. Wide halls, sealed rooms, observation windows, lights dimmed to emergency levels. No voices, no alarms. That silence was wrong. Real emergencies are loud. At the nurses' station, monitors were frozen on login screens. Papers littered the floor. I saw the word subject repeated on observation charts instead of patient. That told me this place was never meant to heal people. A single thump echoed from deeper in the wing. One impact, then nothing. It sounded like a body hitting a door. We all froze at the same time. We advanced east toward the control section. Along the way, we found a staff member dead in the hallway, face down, badge visible. The body was stiff. Blood around the head had dried. That meant this had started earlier than anyone admitted. In a small office nearby, someone had written, "Seal it now" on the wall in thick marker. That message was not for us. It was for someone who waited too long. When the scream came, it was brief and close enough to confirm it was inside the wing. I radioed command and got the same answer again. Lethal only, no survivors. Moments later, a figure charged us down a corridor. Hospital scrubs, bare feet, movement too fast and too direct to be normal. My first shots did nothing to slow it. Noah dropped it cleanly. When it hit the floor, it twitched and went still. Its eyes stayed open. That was when the mission changed in my head. This was not terrorism. This was an infection. It spread fast and ignored pain. The kill order was not about witnesses. It was about containment. We pushed forward with that understanding. Every door was a threat. Every shadow mattered. Shaw guided us toward the server room, hands shaking despite his effort to control them. The corridor narrowed as we moved deeper into the control section, the ceiling lower here, packed with ductwork and cable trays. Emergency lights ran along the floor instead of overhead, casting everything in a flat, colorless glow. It made distances hard to judge, and movement easier to miss. I slowed us down without saying it out loud, shortening steps, forcing everyone to stay tight. This was no longer a place where speed helped. We passed another observation window on the left. Inside the room, a person stood facing the far wall, head tilted down, shoulders hunched. The posture looked wrong, not relaxed, not tense, just held in place. I stopped and raised my fist. Evan froze mid-step, shield angled. Noah shifted his aim past my shoulder. I watched the figure for a full 10 seconds. It did not turn. It did not sway. It only made small, repetitive movements with its hands against the wall, slow and uneven, as if rubbing or tapping without purpose. The sound was faint but audible through the glass, a soft scraping that kept repeating. Luis leaned close enough for me to hear him through the mask. He did not raise his voice. He did not sound alarmed. He sounded focused. He said that behavior did not match shock or panic. It matched neurological impairment. That word stayed with me. Impairment implies damage, not fear. I made the decision not to engage. The order was lethal, but firing through glass inside a sealed wing was a risk I did not need yet. We were not here to clear every room. We were here to get the data and leave the place locked behind us. I motioned forward and we moved past the window, rifles tracking the figure until it fell out of view. The closer we got to the control rooms, the more signs we saw that containment had failed from the inside. Doors designed to lock automatically were wedged open with carts or overturned stools. One hallway had dried streaks along the baseboards, dragged out from a room that now stood empty. Someone had tried to move fast while bleeding, or had been moved by someone else who did not care about damage. Shaw stopped at a wall-mounted directory and wiped it with his sleeve. The map underneath showed the wing layout, color-coded zones, arrows for airflow direction. Several sections were marked with thick red X shapes, hand-drawn, not printed. Somebody on the inside had tried to isolate sections manually. That meant the system either failed or was overridden. Neither option was comforting. We reached a four-way intersection where the sound changed. The ventilation hum took on a deeper tone, and beneath it I could hear movement. Not footsteps, something less controlled. Weight shifting, scraping. Occasional dull impacts that sounded like a body bumping into a surface without trying to avoid it. I held the team at the corner and leaned just enough to see down the cross corridor. 3 figures were moving there, all in hospital clothing. One was upright and swaying, arms hanging loose. Another was crouched low, rocking back and forth, head striking a wall with uneven rhythm. The third moved differently from the others, faster, pacing in short bursts before stopping and jerking its head toward the ceiling vents. They were not communicating. They were not coordinating. They were not responding to each other at all. They occupied the same space the way animals share a feeding area, aware of movement but not forming groups. Noah's breathing changed in my ear. Not panic, just adjustment. He saw what I saw. Evan shifted his shield slightly to cover more of the opening. Luis stayed back, scanning our rear, because he understood what happens when attention narrows in places like this. Engaging them would mean noise, possibly more rushing movement from deeper in the wing. Avoiding them meant trusting that they would not suddenly sprint toward us. I watched them another few seconds and noticed something important. None of them moved towards sound. One of them reacted when a ceiling vent rattled, snapping its head up, but none of them came toward us. That told me they were reactive, not hunting. Not yet. I signaled a silent detour, and we backed away from the intersection, choosing the narrower service corridor that looped toward the server room. It added distance, but it kept us away from that cluster. Every step felt calculated now, like the wing itself was testing our patience. The service corridor was cramped, lined with electrical panels and pipe runs. The air smelled sharper here, more chemical, less filtered. A faint mist hung near the floor in one section, where a pipe had ruptured and been hastily patched with tape and clamps. Someone had tried to keep systems running long after they should have evacuated. Halfway down the corridor, Shaw slowed and raised a hand. He pointed to the floor. A boot print, fresh enough that moisture still clung to the edges. Not ours. Barefoot prints crossed over it, toes dragging. The two sets overlapped in a way that told a story I did not like. Someone uninfected had been moving through here recently. Luis noticed it too. He did not comment, but I saw his jaw tighten behind the mask. There was a difference between killing infected threats and killing people who might still be thinking, still afraid. The Order did not care about that distinction, but we did. We reached the server room door. It was heavier than the others, reinforced, no window. A small red indicator above the access panel glowed steady, meaning the system still had power here. Shaw stepped forward and checked the panel. The screen flickered but responded. He whispered that he could open it without forcing entry, but it would take time. Time meant noise from inside, lights changing, systems waking up. I weighed that against a breach. A forced entry would be faster but louder. Given what we had seen, loud was not our friend. I gave him the nod to proceed quietly. While Shaw worked, Evan and Noah covered the corridor. I kept my eyes moving, checking reflections in metal surfaces, watching for movement in the dim. The respirator pressed into my face, the seal tugging at my skin every time I shifted my jaw. Sweat pooled under my collar. I ignored it. The door unlocked with a soft click and swung inward. The server room was cooler than the hallway, chilled air pouring out over our boots. Racks of equipment lined both sides, indicator lights blinking steadily. The sound of fans filled the space, loud enough to mask small noises, but not enough to hide a sprint. Shaw moved straight to the labeled rack without hesitation. He had memorized the layout from the briefing. That worried me more than it reassured me. It meant someone had known exactly where this data would be, long before tonight. As Shaw began disconnecting cables, I scanned the room. No bodies, no movement, but there were signs of activity. A chair pulled back from a workstation, a keyboard shoved aside. On one monitor, a paused video frame showed a hallway camera feed from earlier, time-stamped hours before our arrival. I could see people running past the camera, some in scrubs, some in lab coats. One security guard with his baton raised. All of them were moving away from something off-screen. I looked away before curiosity pulled me closer. The order said, "Do not access the data." That order existed for a reason. Shaw's hands moved faster now, confidence returning as he focused on a task he understood. He slid the drive free and sealed it in the rugged case. He held it up for me to see through the clear faceplate. The weight of that small object felt disproportionate to the danger around us. That was when the sound changed outside. The ventilation hum was still there, but layered over it was movement, faster now, heavier, footfalls, multiple, not controlled, not careful. Noah's voice came over the radio, tight but steady. He reported movement in the corridor, at least 4 contacts, moving toward the server room. He did not call them suspects. He did not call them civilians. He called them contacts. I ordered Shaw to secure the case and move to the door. Evan shifted position, shield forward. Luis stepped closer to me, eyes darting between the doorway and the racks, calculating angles. The first contact appeared in the doorway without slowing, slamming into the doorframe hard enough to crack plastic trim. The body rebounded, and then surged forward again. It did not raise its arms to protect its face. It did not react to pain. It simply moved toward us. We fired controlled shots. The first contact went down, but 2 more pushed over it immediately, tripping and scrambling, climbing over the fallen body without hesitation. One slipped on blood and hit the floor hard, then dragged itself forward using only its arms. This was no longer isolated infection. This was spread, fast, uncontained. Whatever started here had moved through the wing unchecked for hours. Evan took a hit on the shield, the impact loud and solid. The contact pressed its face against the clear surface, mouth working, teeth clicking against plastic. Its eyes were unfocused but locked forward. Evan shoved it back, and Noah dropped it with a clean shot. Another contact rushed from the side corridor, faster than the others. It moved with purpose, low and direct, closing distance too quickly. I fired and saw the rounds land, but it still made it within arm's reach before collapsing. That delay mattered. It told me the infection was changing behavior. Some were slower, some were faster. We cleared the immediate area and fell back into the server room long enough for Shaw to confirm the drive was secured. The corridor outside was littered with bodies now, tangled together, some still twitching. The smell had changed, heavier, more organic. Luis checked Evan's shield for cracks and then checked Evan himself for tears in his gloves and sleeves. He found nothing, but his hands lingered longer than usual, like he did not trust what his eyes were telling him. I keyed the radio and told command we had the data and were encountering widespread infected movement inside the wing. I requested immediate authorization to seal exits and initiate full containment. The response came back slower this time, not delayed by signal, delayed by choice. Command confirmed containment was already authorized. Fire doors above us were being sealed. The hospital was being isolated from the wing. They told us to exit via the original route and ensure no breaches remained. That meant we were the last people going out. I looked at my team. 5 men in a sealed underground wing filled with infected, carrying a drive someone desperately wanted. The route back would not be clean. I told them we were moving now, and we were not stopping for anything that was not directly in our path. No detours, no curiosity, no hero decisions. We get out or we do not get out. We stepped back into the corridor with rifles up and spacing tight, the server room door sealing behind us with a heavy mechanical click that sounded final even though it was not meant to be. The hallway we had cleared minutes earlier no longer felt empty. Bodies lay where they had fallen, some twisted in positions that blocked clean movement, others slumped against walls. A few still showed small, uneven motions that made it impossible to tell at a glance whether the nervous system was still firing or if it was just muscle reflex. I did not allow anyone to slow down to check. Stepping over was safer than leaning in. The noise level was higher now, not loud, but layered. Footfalls echoed from distant corridors. Metal rattled somewhere above the ceiling. A door banged once, hard enough to vibrate the floor, then hit again. The wing felt awake in a way it had not before. We had drawn attention, and whatever remained inside was reacting to it. We moved in short, controlled bursts, clearing corners just enough to advance, not enough to chase. Evan led with the shield, its clear surface now streaked and scratched, visibility reduced but still usable. Noah stayed just off his shoulder, rifle tracking movement zones. Shaw kept the drive case tucked tight against his chest, one hand gripping it through his sling as if he was afraid it might be pulled away. Luis rotated between rear security and checking our flanks, eyes sharp behind the mask. At the first intersection we reached, the corridor we needed was partially blocked by a fallen cart and 2 bodies tangled together. One wore scrubs, the other a security uniform. The security officer's baton lay nearby, snapped in half. The way the bodies were positioned told me there had been a struggle, close and desperate. I did not try to imagine how it ended. I focused on angles and movement. As Evan nudged the cart aside with the edge of his shield, a sound came from behind the nearest door on our left. It was not a scream or a bang. It was a voice, low and hoarse, repeating the same word over and over. I could not make out the word clearly, but the tone was unmistakable. Human, fearful, still aware enough to speak. Luis reacted before I did. He shifted toward the door, not opening it, just angling his body as if to listen. His posture changed, shoulders forward, weight set. He was ready to help. That instinct is why he was valuable and why this situation was dangerous. I put a hand out and pressed it flat against his chest, stopping him. He looked at me, eyes searching for permission I could not give. The order echoed in my head, not as words anymore but as pressure. No survivors. Anyone inside the wing was considered compromised. We had already seen what partial infection looked like. The voice behind the door cracked and turned into coughing. Wet, uncontrolled. Something struck the inside of the door from the other side. Once, then slid down. The sound ended in a dull thump against the floor. We moved past without opening the door. Nobody said anything. Nobody needed to. The silence between us felt heavier than the respirators on our faces. As we advanced, the lighting changed again. Overhead fluorescents flickered back on in sections, washing the corridor in harsh white light that exposed every stain and scuff. That told me someone or something was interacting with the control systems. The wing was not just decaying, it was being actively altered, either by automated containment protocols or by infected individuals triggering sensors without understanding them. The next cluster of contacts came fast. 2 figures spilled out from a side corridor, drawn by the sound of our movement. One moved slow and uneven, dragging a leg that bent the wrong way. The other sprinted, arms pumping, head low. The difference in speed forced split-second decisions. We engaged the runner first. He went down hard but not clean. He slid across the floor and collided with Evan's shield, momentum carrying him forward even as his body failed. The slower contact reached us seconds later, mouth open, eyes glassy, arms raised not in defense, but reach. I fired once, and it dropped where it stood. I did not wait to see if it would get back up. We moved past immediately, boots slipping slightly on fluids that had no place in a hospital corridor. Noah reported movement behind us, more than before. We were no longer slipping through unnoticed. The wing was filling with sound, and sound was drawing bodies. That meant our window was closing. At the service corridor junction, we encountered our first real choke point. The narrow passage we had used earlier was now partially blocked by debris and 2 more bodies. Beyond it, I could hear movement, closer and more chaotic than before. Someone or something was pushing through from the other side. I made the call to hold the junction long enough to clear a path. Evan braced the shield and Noah took position to fire past it. I covered the opposite angle while Luis stayed just behind Evan, ready to pull him back if the shield failed. Shaw stayed low, pressed against the wall, drive case clutched tight. The first contact came through the debris without slowing, climbing over bodies with awkward strength. Noah fired and dropped it, but another followed immediately, then another. These were slower, more numerous, pushing forward without coordination, but with persistence. Each one that fell became an obstacle the next had to climb, slowing them just enough to keep the line from breaking. A fast mover appeared behind the slower group, darting through gaps, slipping on blood, and catching itself with hands that slapped wet tile. It lunged toward the shield and slammed into it hard enough to force Evan back a step. The impact echoed down the corridor. That sound mattered. It told everything else in the wing exactly where we were. We cleared the junction and pushed through, dragging the last body out of the way with a boot rather than hands. The service corridor swallowed us again, but the sense of safety it had provided earlier was gone. The air felt thicker. The chemical smell burned in my nose even through the respirator. Halfway down the corridor, Luis stumbled. It was minor, just a misstep on uneven flooring, but when he caught himself, I saw him glance down at his glove. There was a smear on it, dark and wet, not from the floor but from contact. He froze for half a second longer than normal. I grabbed his wrist and pulled his hand up into the light. The glove was intact. No tear, no exposed skin. The smear sat on the surface, slick and dark. Luis nodded once, forcing himself to move again, but something had shifted. He began checking his hands more often, rubbing fingers together inside the gloves, as if feeling for something he could not see. That was when I understood how infection would get inside a team like this. Not through obvious bites or dramatic injuries, but through small contacts, doubts, and the inability to fully trust your own gear when everything around you was contaminated. We reached the airlock chamber near our original entry point. The outer door was still sealed. The inner door stood closed, its control panel blinking red. The system had rearmed itself. Containment protocols were taking over. Shaw stepped forward to work the panel, but the screen flashed an error message and went dark. He tried the manual override. It resisted, then stopped completely. He looked back at me and shook his head. Behind us, the sounds were closer now. Footfalls overlapped. Doors slammed. Something hit the wall hard enough to make dust fall from the ceiling. The wing was no longer just reacting. It was pressing toward us. I keyed the radio and called command, telling them the airlock was sealed and we needed it opened now. The reply came after a pause that felt too long. They said the wing was in full containment mode and could not be reopened without authorization from a higher level. They told us to stand by. Stand by meant wait. Waiting in a sealed wing full of infected was not an option. I ordered Evan to prepare a breach on the inner door. He hesitated just long enough to remind me that breaching here risked contaminating the hospital. That concern had mattered earlier. Now it competed with the reality of being overrun. Another body slammed into the far end of the corridor, followed by two more. The shapes were still too far to identify clearly, but their movement was faster than before. The infection was not static, it was adapting. I made the call. Evan set the charge low and tight, designed to blow the locking mechanism without destroying the frame. We fell back, covered angles, and the blast went off with a sharp crack that echoed through the chamber. The door buckled inward but did not fully open. Evan rammed it with the shield and it gave way enough for us to squeeze through one by one. The air beyond felt warmer, less filtered. Hospital air. We were almost out. As I turned to cover the rear, I saw Luis lagging half a step behind. His movements were slightly off, not delayed exactly, just less precise. He lifted his rifle a fraction too high, then corrected. His head tilted as if listening to something I could not hear. I told him to move. He did, but the look in his eyes stayed with me. We sealed the door behind us manually, throwing every latch we could reach. The pounding began almost immediately on the other side, heavy and constant. The metal bowed inward with each impact. It would not hold forever. We were back in the service corridor attached to the hospital, but we were not safe. The drive case was still in Shaw's hands. The infection was still behind us, and one of my men might already be carrying it inside. The corridor here looked cleaner than the wing we had left, but it was still wrong. The lights were on at half power, not bright enough to reassure anyone, not dim enough to hide stains. A fire door farther down stood closed, its red paint scratched near the handle, metal showing through. Someone had tried to force it from this side earlier and failed. That told me we were not the first ones to try to leave. I ordered us forward toward the stairwell that would take us up into a restricted service level of the hospital. The elevator was not an option. Elevators trap people, and trapped people panic. Panic spreads faster than infection. As we moved, the pounding behind the sealed door intensified. The sound changed from isolated impacts to a steady rhythm, several bodies striking at once. The metal groaned. Dust sifted from the ceiling seam where the door met the wall. The containment system had slowed them, not stopped them. Halfway down the corridor, the first sign of hospital staff appeared. A janitorial cart lay on its side near an intersection, cleaning supplies spilled across the floor. A pair of gloves rested neatly on the cart's handle, untouched. That detail stood out more than the mess. Someone had removed the gloves deliberately, not dropped them in panic. I slowed us down and checked angles before advancing. The intersection opened into a wider service area with laundry chutes and supply cages. The cages were locked, but their wire sides were bent outward in places, as if someone had pressed against them from inside. A sound came from behind one of the cages, a low, irregular breathing noise, wet and uneven. I held up a fist and we stopped. Evan angled the shield. Noah lined up past him. Luis stayed close to me, posture stiff, movements precise but slightly delayed. Shaw pressed back against the wall, trying to make himself smaller while still holding the drive secure. The breathing grew louder, followed by a scraping noise as fingers dragged across wire. A face pushed into view between the bent metal strands. It was a man in hospital scrubs, eyes unfocused, mouth open, lips cracked and dark. He did not call out. He did not plead. He just stared through the cage at us and leaned forward until the wire bit into his cheeks. Behind him, another shape shifted, then another. The cage rattled as weight pressed from inside. Someone had locked infected staff into the supply cage to buy time. That time was gone. I did not hesitate. This was a choke point we could not leave active behind us. I fired through the wire where I had a clear line and saw the man collapse backward. Evan followed with controlled shots, each impact dropping another body. The cage fell silent except for the metallic creak of bent wire settling under released pressure. We moved on immediately. No discussion, no checking for signs of life. The cost of hesitation was clear now. At the stairwell door, the access panel blinked amber, restricted, but not locked. I pushed it open and felt warmer air rush out from above, carrying the smell of disinfectant and something sour underneath. Hospital smells always mix like that. It means people are working and failing at the same time. We took the stairs 2 at a time, boots thudding against concrete steps. The stairwell echoed our movement, sound bouncing upward and downward. I hated that. Sound carried too far in enclosed spaces. On the first landing, we encountered our first uninfected survivor since entering the wing. A nurse crouched against the wall, hands over her ears, rocking slowly. Her uniform was torn at the shoulder. Blood streaked one sleeve, dried and dark. Her eyes snapped up when she saw us, wide and clear. She was still there, still thinking. She started to speak, voice shaking, trying to form words through tears and exhaustion. She said there were more down below, that the doors sealed too fast, that some people were still hiding in rooms that had not been breached. She begged us not to leave them. The order cut through my head again, sharp and unyielding. No survivors. Anyone inside the wing was considered compromised. The stairwell connected directly to that wing. This nurse had been there long enough to know what was happening. She might be clean, she might not. Luis stepped forward before I could stop him. He knelt slightly, keeping distance, hands open, voice low and controlled. He asked her if she had been bitten or scratched. She shook her head violently, insisting she had not, that she had hidden when it started, that she had watched it happen through a door window. I watched Luis closely as he spoke. His words were steady, but his movements were not quite right. His gaze flicked past the nurse more than once, tracking sounds that were not there. His breathing inside the mask was louder than before. The nurse reached out toward him without thinking, fingers brushing his sleeve. Luis flinched hard, pulling back faster than necessary. That reaction told me more than anything else. He was afraid of contact. Not just protocol afraid, something deeper. I made the call. I told Evan to cover and Noah to watch the stairwell below. I raised my rifle and aimed center mass. The nurse saw the decision in my posture before I said anything. Her expression shifted from relief to disbelief, then to raw fear. She tried to back away, hands coming up too late. I fired once. She fell against the wall and slid down, leaving a smear of red that stood out starkly against the white paint. The stairwell went silent except for the echo of the shot fading upward. Luis stared at the body for a second too long. When he looked back at me, there was something else there now. Not anger, not accusation, understanding, and something like resignation. We moved again, faster. There was no room left for debate. At the next level up, the stairwell door was barricaded from the other side with a gurney and a stack of supply boxes. Someone above had tried to keep whatever was below from reaching the patient floors. That meant there were still people alive up there, or had been. Evan and Noah worked together to pull the barricade aside just enough to slip through. The moment the gap opened, a body slammed into it from the other side. Not from below, from the hospital level. The figure stumbled into view, a man in a patient gown, IV pole tangled around one arm. He fell forward, catching himself on his knees, then looked up at us with a face twisted in confusion and pain. His mouth opened and closed without sound. Behind him, more movement. Shadows rushing across the polished hospital floor. The infection was not contained to the wing anymore. It had reached the hospital proper. We engaged immediately. Evan pushed forward, shield leading, creating space. Noah fired controlled shots past him, dropping the patient before he could rise. 2 more figures rushed the gap, moving fast despite injuries, bare feet slapping tile. They went down hard but kept crawling until rounds stopped them completely. The hallway beyond was chaos. Overturned carts, abandoned wheelchairs, a trail of blood leading toward patient rooms where doors stood half open. Alarm lights flashed red along the ceiling, but no sirens sounded. Someone had muted them. We advanced into the hospital level with the same discipline we had used underground, but the environment changed everything. This was not a sealed wing. This was a living space designed for comfort and care, now turned into a maze of cover and blind spots. Infected emerged from rooms unpredictably. Some were slow, confused, bumping into walls. Others moved with sudden speed, sprinting short distances before crashing into obstacles. The variation forced constant adjustment. There was no pattern to rely on anymore. Luis lagged again. I saw it clearly this time. His movements were still precise, but his reaction timing was off. He hesitated a fraction longer before raising his rifle. His head tilted toward a sound that none of us reacted to. I called his name over the radio, not shouting, just checking. He answered immediately, voice steady, too steady. He said he was fine. I believed him because I needed to keep moving. We reached a locked fire door that should have led to an exterior ramp. The access panel blinked green, then red, then went dead. The building systems were failing in stages now, cascading problems stacking on top of each other. Behind us, the stairwell door buckled inward. The infected from below were pushing through containment, drawn upward by sound and movement. The pounding was heavier than before, more coordinated. I ordered Evan to breach the fire door. He placed the charge while Noah and I held the corridor. Shaw crouched low, drive case still secure but now smeared with blood from incidental contact. He wiped it on his sleeve without looking. The blast blew the door outward into the ramp space, sending a rush of cold night air through the hallway. For a moment, it felt like relief. Fresh air, an exit. That moment ended when figures appeared at the far end of the ramp, silhouettes moving against emergency lighting. Not infected, armed, hospital security, or what remained of it, weapons raised, eyes wide. They shouted at us to stop, voices cracking, fingers tight on triggers. They did not know who we were. They did not know what we were carrying. They only saw armed men emerging from a sealed wing full of dead bodies. I raised my hand to signal ceasefire and tried to identify us. The words tangled in my throat as a shape burst through the stairwell door behind us, fast and low, slamming into Noah from the side. Everything collapsed into motion at once. Gunfire echoed in the confined space. Infected surged forward. Security reacted without coordination. Evan turned to cover Noah, shield-absorbing impacts. Luis moved toward Noah as well, faster than I'd seen him move in minutes. Luis fired at point-blank range into the infected body on Noah, dropping it, then turned toward another threat without being prompted. His movements were sudden, sharp, almost too fast. That was when I knew. Whatever he was carrying was no longer hypothetical. We broke contact and pushed through the ramp, leaving bodies behind on both sides. The door began to close automatically behind us, systems finally doing their job. The last thing I saw before it sealed was Luis turning back toward the hospital corridor, rifle raised, expression unreadable behind the mask. The cold air that hit us had felt real for half a second, enough to trick my brain into thinking we had made it outside. Then I noticed the ramp walls were concrete on both sides, with no open sky. only a long enclosed run that led to a roll-up vehicle door at the far end. Red emergency lights strobed above that door, reflecting off the wet floor. The ramp was a containment tunnel, not an exit. There was an exterior door somewhere beyond the roll-up, but it was not in our control. That meant we were in a box with 2 lids, and the hospital lid behind us was the one taking the hits. Evan moved forward to the roll-up door and looked for a manual chain or override lever. He found a panel, opened it, and immediately shook his head. The motor controls were powered, but locked out. Noah took a knee and covered down the ramp with his rifle anyway, the way he always did when he did not trust a corner. Shaw stood pressed to the right wall, drive case still cradled tight, eyes bouncing between the sealed door behind us and the roll-up door ahead. Luis was gone from our side of the door now, and the silence from inside felt temporary. A security camera above the ramp door rotated, stopped, and centered on us. That camera movement hit harder than any shout. It meant someone had control from outside. Someone was watching and deciding what to do with 5 contaminated men standing inside a containment tunnel. My radio crackled. The voice on the other end was not the deputy chief. It was a command duty officer I recognized, calm and distant, the sort of tone used when someone reads policy aloud. He told me the hospital wing had been declared a full biohazard incident. He told me all egress points were being sealed pending assessment. He told me to stand by for instructions and to keep my team contained inside the ramp. He did not ask if we were injured. He did not ask if any of us had exposure. He did not ask if Luis was with us. I gave him the facts fast, trimmed down to what mattered. We had the drive. Luis was separated on the hospital side. The wing was compromised beyond containment. The infection had reached the hospital level. We had encountered fast movers and slow movers, both ignoring pain responses. I said the ramp was not a true exit and asked for immediate release to a secure staging area outside the building. The duty officer replied with more procedure, still calm, still distant. He said the ramp was the staging area. He said a decontamination team would arrive when it was safe. He said we were to surrender the drive case through the pass-through slot in the roll-up door once the receiving team arrived. No mention of extraction, no mention of medical care, no mention of the woman who demanded delivery, just a process that could stretch until we stopped being a problem. Evan stepped away from the panel and looked at me. His face behind the mask was hard to read, but I could see the question in his eyes. He wanted to know if command was leaving us here. Noah did not ask. Noah kept his rifle steady and watched the sealed hospital door, because Noah understood something I was still trying to deny. If command shut both doors and called it containment, there would be no rescue coming down that ramp. The pounding started again behind us. It was not just one body now. It was several, hitting the sealed door with staggered rhythm. The metal frame creaked. Evan moved back toward it and pressed his shield against the seam, as if that could add strength. Luis had been on the other side when the door closed. If Luis was still thinking, he would be trying to open it. If Luis was not thinking, he would be part of what was hitting it. Either option was bad. Shaw shifted his grip on the drive case and looked down at his gloves. His hands were not steady anymore. He tried to hide it by tightening his elbows and holding the case closer, but I saw his fingers flexing in small motions, checking for a tear he could not feel. He told me in a quiet voice that he had brushed the case against the ramp wall during the push-through, and he did not know what was on the wall. He did not say blood. He did not say saliva. He did not say anything dramatic. He just wanted certainty, and there was no certainty left. Luis had been the one who checked seals and kept everyone honest. Luis was not here. Luis had also been the one whose movement started to slip, whose reactions stopped matching the rest of ours. I kept remembering that moment when he flinched away from the nurse's touch, faster than needed, as if contact itself had become a threat inside his head. I had ignored it because we were still moving. I had ignored it because I wanted the problem to stay hypothetical. I keyed the radio again, pushing harder this time, asking for a live supervisor to meet us at the ramp door, asking for medical screening, asking for a hard plan for extraction. The response was a short acknowledgement, and then a new instruction delivered in the same calm voice. The duty officer ordered me to place the drive case on the ground in the center of the ramp, step back, and keep my hands visible for the camera. He said the drive would be recovered by a remote team. He said that was non-negotiable. That was the betrayal, clean and simple. The moment command stopped treating us as officers and started treating us as contamination. The drive mattered. The team did not. We were an expense. We were a liability. The drive was the only thing that had to leave. Shaw's eyes locked on mine as I relayed the instruction with as few words as possible. He did not argue. He did not protest. He set the case down carefully in the middle of the ramp, squared it to the door, and backed away. I could tell he wanted to say something about how wrong this was, about how he had done his job, about how he had followed the rules. Instead, he just swallowed it, and stood there with his hands half raised, waiting for the next decision someone else would make. A metal clunk sounded from the roll-up door, then a narrow slot at the bottom opened just enough for a wheeled retrieval bar to slide out. It moved slow, controlled, remote-operated. The bar hooked under the handle of the drive case and pulled it back through the slot. The slot closed. The case was gone. That was the whole recovery. No human face, no spoken thanks. Just a machine taking what it wanted and sealing itself again. The ramp lights shifted from red to amber. A ventilation fan above us ramped up, louder than the server room fans, pushing air hard enough to lift small bits of dust off the floor. A fine mist started coming out of ceiling nozzles. Not water. It smelled sharp and sterile. The kind of smell that says someone is trying to kill microbes, not clean dirt. Evan raised his shield over his head on instinct. Noah angled his face away. Luis would have told us what chemical it might be based on the odor. Luis was not here. The sealed hospital door behind us took a heavy hit and bent inward at the top corner. A gap opened, small at first, then larger with the next impact. Fingers appeared through it, grabbing metal and pulling. Not careful hands, hands that did not feel pain. Evan moved to brace the seam with the shield and his shoulder, trying to keep the gap from widening. Noah fired into the gap when a face pressed against it, and the body dropped away. The door kept bending anyway, pushed by weight behind it. The mist thickened, visibility dropped. The floor became slick under our boots. The fan noise covered smaller sounds, which meant we could not hear movement until it was close. That was not an accident. This was a sterilization cycle, and the design did not care if we were breathing behind masks. The system's job was to treat everything in the tunnel as contaminated and handle it. Evan coughed once inside his respirator and shook his head hard, adjusting the seal. Noah's voice came through the radio, clipped and forced, telling me the door was going to fail. I could see it myself. The top hinge area was deforming, metal tearing away from the frame. Another body slammed into it from inside, and a chunk of the door edge peeled back. I tried the roll-up door panel again, knowing it was pointless. Locked out, I tried my radio again, demanding the sterilization cycle stop and the ramp door open. The duty officer answered with the same calm tone and gave the final sealing order in language that sounded rehearsed. He said the hospital was entering full lockdown. He said all exposed personnel were to be considered compromised until proven otherwise. He said no door would be opened until the incident commander declared the area safe. He said I was to remain in place. He did not say we would be extracted afterward. We were trapped between a failing door and an unopening door, while the ceiling sprayed sterilant and the fan roared. That is what betrayal looked like in real life. Not a dramatic speech. Not a gun turned on us. A decision made behind glass, then carried out by motors and locks. The hospital door finally failed. It did not explode inward. It bowed and tore and then gave way in one section, leaving a gap wide enough for a body to squeeze through. The first infected came through low, crawling, dragging itself into the ramp while the mist coated its hair and face. A second followed immediately, then a third, pushing over the first without hesitation. Their movement was clumsy for half a second, then it sped up as they found traction. We engaged. Noah fired measured shots, trying to conserve ammunition and avoid ricochets in the narrow tunnel. Evan used the shield to keep bodies from reaching us, shoving them back into the gap where they piled up. I fired into targets that broke through that pile, focusing on stopping movement, not making perfect shots. The mist made it hard to track. The fan noise made it hard to hear if something was close. Everything depended on sight and timing. Shaw backed away toward the roll-up door, trying to keep distance, trying to stay out of the line of fire. His foot slid on the slick floor, and he went down on one knee. He caught himself, tried to stand, and his glove snagged on something sharp on the wall. The glove tore at the fingertip. It was a small tear. It should not have mattered much in any other situation. In this situation, it was a death sentence delivered quietly. He saw it immediately, his eyes locked on the tear. He tried to pinch it closed with his other hand, tried to keep his finger from touching the wall, tried to protect skin that might already be exposed. He did not scream. He did not beg. He just froze in place for a second, because he understood what exposure meant down here. An infected broke through the gap and lunged toward him. Evan tried to reach him with the shield, but there were too many bodies at the door now, pushing through. Noah fired, dropped the one rushing Shaw, but another was already crawling over the fallen body. Shaw scrambled backward, slipped again, and hit the roll-up door hard. The infected reached him and grabbed at his arm and shoulder. I fired, and the infected dropped off him, but Shaw's sleeve was torn open and his body language changed instantly. He pulled his arm in tight and started rubbing his forearm against his chest, as if he could erase contact by friction. Evan took a hit next. A fast mover burst through the gap, low and direct, slipping between bodies, finding the shield edge and driving into it. Evan shoved back, but the fast mover caught the side of his arm, where the shield did not cover, teeth snapping at fabric. Evan jerked away and slammed the shield down, pinning it. Then Noah dropped it. Evan looked at his sleeve, checking for a bite mark through fabric. He did not say anything. He did not need to. The way he kept flexing his fingers told me his arm had been scraped or worse. Luis was not part of this fight. Luis was still inside the hospital corridor on the other side of that torn door. I caught a glimpse through the gap, a figure moving with a rifle, stepping over bodies, head snapping towards sound. The figure wore our gear. It moved too fast, too sharp, not controlled. Then it vanished into the haze and the crush of bodies. I did not get a clear face. I did not need one. The sterilant mist kept spraying. The fan kept roaring. It felt as if the building wanted to drown the ramp in chemicals until nothing moved. That plan might have worked if we had been alone. With the infected coming through the door, the mist turned the ramp into a slippery kill zone where every step risked a fall and every fall risked contact. Noah's ammunition started running low. I could hear the timing of his shots change, longer pauses, more careful selection. Evan's shield work got slower, his pushes less decisive, his shoulders sagging. Shaw's movements became frantic, his eyes darting, his hands checking the torn glove, then his forearm, then his mask seal. His breathing through the respirator became uneven, not from fear alone, but from the reality that his skin had been exposed, and he could not undo it. We tried to fall back farther up the ramp to create space, but the roll-up door behind us left no room. We were pinned at the top of the tunnel while the infected pushed in from below. If the roll-up opened, we might have run. It did not open. The camera above us kept watching. The system above us kept spraying. The people in command kept us sealed inside. Evan went down first. He did not fall in a dramatic way. His balance failed mid-step, his foot slid, and he hit the floor hard on his side. He tried to get up immediately, but his arm did not respond cleanly. His shield slipped from his grip and skidded down the ramp a few feet. An infected reached him in that moment of weakness and grabbed at his vest. Noah fired and dropped it, but another contact was already stepping over the body. I fired into it and it collapsed, but Evan was still on the ground, still struggling to rise on slick concrete. I grabbed Evan by the back of his vest and pulled him up, hauling him against the roll-up door. His hands kept opening and closing, as if he was trying to force his body to obey. His eyes met mine for half a second, and the look there was simple. He knew what was happening to him. He knew it was fast. Noah held the line as long as he could, firing until his rifle clicked empty. He transitioned to his sidearm without thinking and kept firing, but the infected were too close now, too many bodies pressing into the ramp. One of them reached Noah's arm, grabbed his sleeve, and pulled him off balance. He fired into it at close range, and it dropped, but it took him down with it. He hit the floor, and another contact surged over the fallen one and onto him. Noah fought it off for seconds that felt longer, because there was no room to intervene cleanly without shooting our own. Then, his movement stopped being controlled. Shaw tried to climb onto the wall-mounted ladder track near the roll-up door, looking for an access hatch above. His hands slipped on the rungs because of the mist and because his glove was torn. He got 2 steps up, then an infected grabbed his ankle and yanked him down. Shaw hit the floor and disappeared into the crush at the bottom of the frame of my vision. I heard him struggle. Then it became noise and movement in the haze. That left me with a sidearm, a slick floor, a sealed door behind me, and a ramp filling with infected bodies climbing over each other to reach the top. The sterilant mist kept coming, coating my visor and blurring edges. I wiped it once with my sleeve and it smeared. My radio crackled once more with the same calm duty officer voice stating that containment would be maintained until further notice. No apology, no acknowledgement of what was happening inside the tunnel, just the machine reading policy while men died. I fired until my magazine ran dry, reloaded once, fired again. I did not count shots. I counted distance. Each time a body fell, another stepped over it. The fast ones still came in short bursts, closing space with sudden movement that forced me to back into the roll-up door and brace my shoulders against it. The slow ones kept climbing, hands dragging across the ramp, teeth snapping at fabric when they got close enough. When one finally reached me, it grabbed my sleeve and pulled. I hit it with the muzzle, and it did not react the way a person would. It kept pulling, jaw working. I fired into it until it dropped, but the contact had already smeared something across my glove and sleeve. I could not tell what it was through the mist. I could not stop to check. Another one was already climbing over the fallen body. I kept moving, because stopping meant being taken down. I stepped sideways, slipped, caught myself on the roll-up door track, and felt my glove scrape against metal. For a second, I thought I felt a tear. I looked down, and the mist on my visor made it hard to see. That uncertainty was enough. Once you start wondering if your gear failed, every second becomes a calculation you cannot finish. My last clear view down the ramp showed Evan slumped against the wall, head angled down, hands still flexing, not steady. Noah was on the floor, half covered by bodies, movement uneven. Shaw was gone into the mass. Luis was somewhere behind the broken door, either dead or moving with the infected. None of this was going to end with a rescue team opening the roll-up and pulling us out. Command had already made its choice when it took the drive and sealed the tunnel. I pressed my back against the roll-up door, kept my pistol up, and recorded this because there was no reason left to stay silent. The mission had been a kill order wrapped around a data recovery, and the final step was always going to be burning the witnesses. The city above would keep running for a few more hours. The hospital would keep trying to function until it could not. People would keep telling themselves it was contained, because the alternative was admitting it had already spread. The infected reached me again, hands on my vest, pulling me down the ramp inch by inch. I fired my last rounds into the closest bodies and felt the slide lock back. I had no space to reload cleanly. I tried anyway, hands fumbling because the floor was slick and bodies were pressing in. The magazine slipped and clattered down the ramp out of reach. That was the moment the fight ended. Not with a dramatic final act, but with a piece of metal dropping where I could not get it. The weight hit my legs first, then my chest, then my arms. I kept my head up as long as I could, and kept this recorder close to my mouth. The last thing I heard through the fan noise and the pounding was the ramp ventilation shifting pitch again, the system switching modes, sealing this tunnel into a final state. No door opened. No voice offered extraction. The camera above kept watching until the haze swallowed everything. If someone finds this file, understand one thing. The first betrayal was the order. The second betrayal was taking the data and sealing the men who retrieved it. The infection did not beat us alone. Policy beat us. Fear beat us. The need to hide the truth beat us. This is Marcus Vell, Metro Special Weapons and Tactics, Charlie Team Leader, recording inside the St. Alder Hospital containment ramp. The drive is gone. The doors are sealed. The team is gone. And the tunnel is filling up. And that's where we'll stop for now. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me how the story hit you, what moments worked, what didn't, and what you'd want to hear next. And a big thank you to everyone supporting the channel, especially with extra membership: Carlos Herrera, Dominique Johnson, The Great Anywho, Jade Allah, Madam Midnight, Deborah Powell, William Blackwell, TJR, Baby Doll. You keep this project alive. Until next time, Survivor. Jack's Nightmares signing off.